because we never stick to the script anyways. So what is the point?
Yes, sir.
Hello and welcome to our continuing coverage of Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India. It marks a pivotal moment in the long-standing India-Russia partnership, with high-level talks expected to deliver concrete outcomes in energy, defense and trade.
Indeed. And President Putin arrived in New Delhi on for the 23rd India-Russia annual summit last evening. His first state visit to India since 2021. He received a warm welcome by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who later hosted him for a private dinner, setting the tone for discussions that are unfolding as we speak at the Hyderabad House today.
Indeed, Mark, the summit agenda is extensive. We are getting to you the latest visuals now from Hyderabad House in New Delhi, where the two principals, Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, will be beginning their summit-level talks shortly. These are the visuals coming to you from Hyderabad House in New Delhi. Remember, President Putin is on a two-day visit to India for the 23rd India-Russia annual summit. Both countries celebrating 25 years of their strategic partnership and the 15th anniversary coming up of the elevation of their ties to a special and privileged strategic partnership.
Indeed, and the leaders are expected to deepen economic ties. They are expected to expand cooperation in oil and energy supplies, also strengthen defense collaborations and various other aspects.
Absolutely. Now, the leaders are expected to deepen economic ties, expand cooperation in oil and energy supplies, strengthen defense collaboration, including missile systems, and explore new avenues in trade and investment.
And in fact, this meeting, it comes at a time when Russia is navigating sanctions and shifting global alliances, while India, of course, is balancing its own strategic interests amid tensions with Western powers. So for Moscow, New Delhi, remains a dependable partner that has resisted Western pressure campaigns. And for India, Russia continues to be a critical supplier of energy and defense technology. Ramesh?
Absolutely. Now, the symbolism of Putin's presence is significant, but beyond the optics, the summit is expected to produce tangible agreements that reinforce the special and privileged strategic partnership between the two nations.
So day two of the Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit, it began with a ceremonial welcome at the forecourt of the Rashtrapati Bhavan in the national capital. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Draupadi Murmu received the visiting leader ahead of bilateral talks and the 23rd India-Russia annual summit, which is currently on.
Right, so Friday is day two of the Russian leader's visit to India. His first engagement of the day was a ceremonial welcome in the forecourt of Rashtrapati Bhavan. Afterwards, President Putin played a wreath at Rajghat in New Delhi, paying homage to Mahatma Gandhi during his state visit to India, marking a key ceremonial engagement ahead of bilateral talks.
Well, both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President Putin are scheduled to issue a joint statement at the Hyderabad House. And later in the evening, the visiting President Putin is to meet his Indian counterpart, Draupadi Murmu, at the Rashtrapati Bhavan.
And at around 9 p.m. India time, President Putin will depart from New Delhi, bringing his two-day state visit to India to an end. So all eyes on the much anticipated India-Russia 23rd Annual Summit that is beginning any moment now at Hyderabad House in New Delhi. Here we can see the two principals, Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, shaking hands on the lawns of the Hyderabad House before they enter the summit venue for delegation-level talks.
Indeed, and a lot is expected from this visit, as we have been saying. There are several areas of cooperation and where there could be an expanded roadmap for deeper cooperation in this special and strategic partnership, especially in the area of people-to-people ties, because there is expectation on agreements that would work out for Indians to be working in Russia and likewise for Russians to be working in India. And apart from that, of course, maybe long-term commitments as far as India's energy security is concerned. And on the defense front, of course, this dialogue is continuous.
Indeed, so we can expect both sides to discuss about the entire gamut of bilateral, regional and global issues, including but not limited to trade and investments, oil and gas, energy cooperation in general, civil, nuclear energy, space cooperation, as well as other key important areas, including space, and also the global issues confronting the world at large, including the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So if you're just joining us, we're getting to the latest visuals of the Indian and Russian leaders at Hyderabad House, shaking hands, posing for photographers ahead of the much anticipated summit level talks, the 23rd edition of the India-Russia Annual Summit that's beginning any moment now in New Delhi.
Our correspondent Siddharth Bhardwaj is joining us from the newsroom now with more inputs. Siddharth, you have been, looking at this visit from the point of view of how the media also is covering it. So in this respect, first you can tell us, how has the media been covering this event from, let's say, the morning? Let's look at the morning newspapers for one.
Oh, first of all, I would like to tell you, Mark, that this is a very significant visit by President Vladimir Putin, and he's coming to India after 2021. It's a huge gap, and it's a significant visit in various terms, as both the sides are expected to take up various issues. There are various MOUs which are expected to be signed between both the countries. The details of MOUs are yet to be out, and as and when they will come, we'll let you know definitely. The day 2 of President Vladimir Putin started off with ceremonial welcome at the forecourt of Rashtrapati Bhavan. We saw how President Putin came and he met Prime Minister Narendra Modi there at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and also the Honorable President of India, Draupadi Murmu. After that, President Putin went to Rajghat to pay respects to Father of the Nation, Mahatma Gandhi. And we also now are showing our viewers the visuals wherein both the leaders are there at the Hyderabad House. Now, since this is a very significant visit, the entire print media, Mark, and in fact, not just print media, the social media and the satellite television, they all are covering this historical visit by President Vladimir Putin. We saw some of the newspapers, English newspapers by Indian English newspapers wherein there are headlines totally covering this historic visit of President Vladimir Putin. We also saw how Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself went to the airport to receive President Vladimir Putin, and he hugged him as well. And later on, we saw a picture wherein both the leaders are sitting in the car, and it's all over the social media. In fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also shared the picture on his X handle. So this goes on to show that the warmness in the ties between both the countries, Mark, and how the Indian print media has covered this significant and historic visit by President Putin. Now, when you talk about the visit and why it is important in my analysis, there are certain sectors which are very, very important when it comes to this visit. These sectors are trade, these sectors are defense, these sectors are energy, these sectors are health, culture, people to people connect. All these sectors, apart from the other sectors, they combine and make this historic visit by President Vladimir Putin. When you talk about trade, we are talking about trade since the morning, since yesterday. The total trade between both the countries stands somewhere at 68.7 billion, and wherein the Indian exports are less than 5 billion US dollars. So this visit is a great opportunity and platform wherein both the leaders will talk it out and narrow that trade deficit, wherein India could send pharmaceuticals, could export rather pharmaceuticals, agri products, food products, chemicals. Apart from that, there are some other products as well. When you talk about defense, it makes it a central pillar of the ties between both the countries, whereas there are lots and lots of talks which are expected to come up, including the joint production of the fighter jets, including S-400, the agreement on S-400 and S-500, and also after that, it comes the energy ties between both the countries. We all know that how India is diversifying its energy sources, and Russia is a key partner in that. When both leaders, right now they are at the Hyderabad house, when they'll talk, there are some, points that will be taken up when it comes to the energy ties between both the countries. All this, Mark, is coming when the world is witnessing wars and conflicts in different parts of the global world. Apart from that, there are certain countries in the global world reeling under the tariffs imposed by the United States. Also, Mark, one thing which I want to mention here is that all this is coming at a time when India is walking towards the path of Make in India, Atmanirbharta, which is self-reliance, and also Vision 2047, Vikasit Bharat at 2047, wherein India will be celebrating the centenary of its independence and is expected to make everything under the sun. So make in India, make for the world. We make in India, we are sending to the global world. And in that context, in the context of this visit to Russia, it will also increase the economy of the country of Bharat, which currently, which is on the path of becoming the world's third largest economy in the world. And we have shown, Mark, you cover economy and you cover the business. You very well know that how India is progressing when it comes to its GDP. The Q2 growth is exceptional, which goes on to show that how India is excelling in every sector, and how today the world is looking at India for collaboration in various sectors. Back to you.
Right, Siddharth, do stay on. We'll come back to you momentarily if we can on this broadcast. Let me take a moment to introduce our guest and welcome him on this broadcast. Joining us is Ambassador Yashvardhan Sinha. He is a former High Commissioner to Sri Lanka and the United Kingdom. We'll be joined momentarily by another guest, Professor Rahul Mishra from the Jawaharlal Nehru University as well. Ambassador Sinha, welcome to this broadcast. Since we are meeting you and talking to you the first time as part of the India-Russia summit, let me take you back to yesterday. We saw some interesting visuals coming from New Delhi at the airport there. Prime Minister Modi breaking protocol to personally receive President Putin at the airport. The proverbial hug was there for all to see, and also a power ride in the Prime Minister's car, the motorcade that brought him from the airport to the Sevati, the rechristened official residence of the Prime Minister. Your thoughts on how the visit has shaped up so far?
Thank you for having me on your show. I think this visit is very significant. It comes at a very critical time. If you recall, President Putin first came here as president of the Russian Federation in October 2000. And I believe this is the 23rd annual summit. But for the first time since the outbreak of the Ukraine-Russia war, President Putin has come to India. The last time, I think, was in 2021. And the very fact that he has come to India for this summit shows the importance that he lays and that both countries lay on this summit and our bilateral relations. It is indeed a special and privileged strategic partnership, and it's for all to see the personal bonhomie and the personal equation between the two leaders. I believe Prime Minister Modi has gone to the airport 6 times before to receive foreign leaders. This time was special, the 7th time. Not only did he receive President Putin at Palam, but he also, President Putin also accompanied him to the Prime Minister's house for a private dinner in the Prime Minister's car. So this was very significant because it sends a message not only to Indians and Russians, but globally, because this time-tested, long-standing friendship has stood the test of time. And I think the fact that they are meeting today officially at Hyderabad House, the agreements that we expect, and more importantly, the discussions that they have will shape the future of bilateral relations for quite some time.
Ambassador Sinha, people are looking at the relationship as having huge potential in terms of, economic value. The question is that, if Russia has sanctions, India has tariffs, there is this issue about how to do business with a country that has sanctions. How is one to fulfill the potential of the economic potential of this relationship? I mean, should we be creating some special purpose vehicles to have trade that can work, between our two countries that avoids the international system?
So I think this is a very important question, and this is something that will occupy the minds of our leaders during their discussions, because as your correspondent said, and I was listening to him carefully, the total bilateral trade is $68.7 billion. Indian exports is only $4.9 billion. And because of our enhanced intake of Russian oil, this imbalance has occurred. There was an imbalance earlier, but it's now come into sharp focus. So I think the roadmap for 2030 for strategic cooperation, economic cooperation between India and Russia, which I believe is going to be discussed, will be very important, because I think it will also show how the two countries can trade with each other despite the adverse circumstances. I recall that when sanctions were imposed on Iran, not UN sanctions, but unilateral sanctions, Iran was an important energy partner. We did find a way, at least initially, to trade with Iran. If I remember correctly, there was an escrow account in an Indian bank, and we did manage to do that. So I think there are ways and means which experts, I'm sure, will find. One thing is clear, that India will continue to buy energy from the cheapest and the most reliable sources in the world, simply because it is critical for our growth and development. And I think we should not and we shall not allow third parties to determine how and where we buy from. Obviously, sanctions on companies like Rosneft and Lukoil will impact the intake, because they are major suppliers from Russia. But I'm sure our leaders and of course the delegations will try and thrash out how this cooperation in the energy sector, which is critical, as I said, for India's economic growth and development progresses.
Ambassador Sinha, as some commentators have said in the last 24 odd hours, that given the fact that the Ukraine-Russia conflict may be nearing its end game, as it were, India and Russia might be looking to for a post-Ukraine conflict scenario in their bilateral ties. So the question is, how do these two sides make their ties future ready in terms of the next big idea, as it were, in their relationship? Protection of investments, maybe incentivizing exports. So how do you look at the future prospects of this relationship if things change in the near term going forward?
When I tuned into your channel, and I was struck by President Putin's visit to Rajghat. He obviously has been there many times before, but the symbolism of him paying obeisance to the father of the nation at Rajghat was not lost on me. And especially when we are in the time of conflict, the Russia-Ukraine war. So I think whether it's the end game or not, only time will tell. But I think there is a certain amount of war fatigue on all sides. There are serious attempts being made on the negotiating table to ensure that peace is ushered in the region. And I think India and Russia need to look forward to see how they can strengthen their cooperation. I think one of the primary areas, apart from defense and energy, is boosting economic cooperation. And as I said earlier, we really need to diversify in terms of our exports to Russia, which are basically primary goods, agricultural products, tea, rice, etc. We need to look beyond that. I mean, obviously, marine products comes to mind. Pharmaceuticals is a very important component because we are a major exporter of generic pharma to all over the world, in the West in particular, but also the global South. And I think Russia would benefit immensely if they are to take advantage of India's capabilities in this area. There are, of course, other areas like IT and IT-enabled services where India is quite advanced, and I think cooperation in that would be mutually beneficial. Defense, of course, as I said earlier, the links are very strong and will continue to remain so in the foreseeable future. One area which I read somewhere was interesting, and that is the Arctic shipbuilding industry. Can India provide some sort of inputs, or at least be part of that shipbuilding industry? Because as you know, Russia has been very active in the Arctic region. So I think there are various fields where I think the two countries could play a role. There is also a talk of a labor mobility agreement. That would be extremely good, because that would mean that India would be able to provide skilled personnel to Russia, where there is obviously an issue regarding the population growth, and that's not just Russia, but all over the West. Right. And I think this could serve as a model, perhaps, if such an agreement is concluded for other countries in the West.
At this point in time, let's introduce you to Professor Rahul Mishra, who joins us from the School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you very much, Professor Mishra. Let's take that point forward about a mobility agreement. And, Ambassador Sinha was really talking about how businesses can expand in between India and Russia, business potential. It really can't expand if, we are only doing businesses from government to government. At the end of the day, I mean, it has to be people to people who are doing businesses, and also professional to professional. How much, weight would you give to this mobility agreement for this potential, economic potential to take off?
Look, we've got to understand that this annual summit between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi is not just another annual summit. There is a very specific context to it. And in that context, whatever agreements, MOUs we come up with, India and Russia, will be directed or motivated by the developments that are happening between India and the US. And labor mobility, the skilled worker mobility, of course, plays a very important role. The question here is how much Russia can accommodate, how hungry Russia is to have Indian professionals there. Of course, the blue-collar workers is certainly something that India and Russia are working on. But there are sectors like advanced technology, IT sector, other sectors, services sector, doctors, engineers, professionals who could work in Russia. And this labor mobility, the skilled worker migration, is something that I hope India and Russia will agree on. But I also wanted to add a point here that in India-Russia partnership, business as usual will not work anymore. If India and Russia together want to give a message, convey a message to the world in these times when both India and Russia individually are challenged at the international level, India's growing role as a leader of the global South and Russia within the Eurasian sphere, it is very important for them to come up with new ideas. And I think to boost their bilateral business, to boost India's share, I think joint ventures in defense sector particularly are very important. It can no longer just be a buyer-seller relationship, and we also need to move beyond BrahMos. So I think S-400 and S-500s are welcome, very delightful items for Indian defense people. But something concerning the joint production is something that I expect from this summit level meeting. The second is, if India wants to just expand its trade using conventional methods, that will not work. Your agriculture sector is not sufficient, because Russia itself is a very powerful country when it comes to agricultural exports. It has been before the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia was supplying most of the agricultural commodities to Europe. So there again, I think pharma is a very promising sector, but so are rare earth minerals, semiconductor sectors, IT hardware, because India has traditionally been an IT software giant, giving all the opportunities to Russia, virtually, and I'm talking about Indian corporate sector. So IT hardware is something on which India and Russia could work together. Oil, of course, has been, the energy sector has been a big shareholder in India-Russia partnership. But there again, we have to find new ways to avoid sanctions. We have to find a mechanism whereby India is not put under greater pressure, and Russia also somehow navigates these new sanctions by the Americans. So I think there is a need to go beyond the conventional methods of bilateral trade, think out of the box, and work on new areas, critical minerals and new and emerging technologies. Like I said before, new ways to promote trade in pharmaceuticals, in health sector, in health services, hospitals, and our hospitality sector, the tourism sector is very important. In health sector, I think nurses from India and doctors from India could also find a place in Russia and contribute massively to their health sector, which is not as strong as Indian health sector. And skilled migrants, I think, is where I'll pin my hopes on, along with tourism sector, where India and Russia could do a lot together.
Very interesting comments there, Professor. I'm intrigued by what you said at the beginning, that it cannot be business as usual anymore when it comes to India-Russia bilateral trade and commerce. And I want to pick you up on that, and I sort of welcome your comments on that as well. When we talk about trade, India-Russia trade in particular, infrastructure and incentives go hand in hand. How do you incentivize Indian exporters to reach out to the Russian market? How can we assure the government of India or Russia or both ensure protection of the investments? Number one. Number two, connectivity is important when it comes to infrastructure or boosting trade and commerce. And what can you tell us about the status of the international north-south transport corridor and also the Chennai-Vladivostok maritime corridor? How are they coming along?
Well, Chennai-Vladivostok corridor, there is a lot that needs to be done to make it something that meets international standards and to make it fully functional.
Right.
On connectivity front, investments in infrastructure, India is open to this idea, and Russia is more than welcome in the infrastructure sector. There are a lot of areas where India is very comfortable working with its friends and like-minded countries. Northeastern states of India have recently witnessed a lot of investment from Japan and increasingly from Australia. So I think infrastructure building is where Russia could do a lot with India. Shipbuilding, as Ambassador Sinha earlier mentioned, is very important sector where India and Russia could work together. We can have UAVs, we can also have the Russian investments in India, or the other way around, Indian investments in Russia and producing more ships, because India's requirements are massive. Now, India has also launched the Sagar Mala initiative, which is building ports and upgrading the maritime infrastructure of India. I think that is one critical sector where trust is a very important element. And Russia ticks all the boxes when it comes to strategic trust, the capacity to invest and operationalize projects, implement projects. So I think maritime sector and port building, port-related infrastructure is something that is worthy of our attention. And in that context, I think in terms of Russian investment in India, we could have more SEZs. along our ports or along our coastal line, which is massive, more than 7,000 kilometers, but also in Russia. So India's Far Act East policy, which aims to connect Russia, and it is an extension of India's Act East policy, I think could be a very good tool. And all we have to do is extend the elements, the pillars of cooperation that we have as part of India's Act East policy with Southeast Asia, with countries of the South Pacific, and also East Asia. So I think on that front, a multi-dimensional approach to cooperation in building trade, in building greater trade partnership is important. And I think there are two countries which are important here, important examples. One is South Korea, with which India has been working very earnestly on shipbuilding and defense production areas. Not really just the defense, but also the civilian shipbuilding areas. So I think that is one area of cooperation. With Singapore, we have been working on infrastructure, on building advanced cities, smart cities. That is one area in which India and Russia could work together. And also with CLMV countries, the countries in Indochina, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, our infrastructure, IT, and English language training programs are very important. When we look at India-Russia, the relationship over past more than 7 decades, a major pitfall is that our people are not familiar with each other's languages. So India's Hindi or English language and Russian, we should have more higher education cooperation, collaboration. And that will also facilitate in familiarizing people, and Mark earlier mentioned the people-to-people connect. I think that people-to-people connect that we have with countries like Australia or Singapore or the US is somewhat missing in case of Russia. Whether it is inflow and outflow of Russian and Indian tourists, or it is the exchanges at the higher education level or think tank exchanges, there is a lot that can be done. And through people-to-people connect, greater people-to-people exchanges and their networking, I think a lot can happen. And this is where the corporate sector can play a very important role. I mean, tourism and hospitality sector are primarily led by the corporate sector. So they could play a very important role in boosting trade. And this boosting of trade is not just commodities and conventional methods. This could reach higher levels through people-to-people contacts and
right, Professor, do hold your thoughts there. I hate to interrupt you there, but we're getting to you the latest from Hyderabad House.
आज हमारी ये समिट आगे बढ़ रही है। एक्सेलेंसी, आपकी यात्रा बहुत ही ऐतिहासिक है। 2001 में जब आपने कार्यभार संभाला और भारत की आपकी यात्रा पहली हुई, उसको आज 25 साल हो गए और उस पहली यात्रा में ही स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की एक मजबूत नींव रखी गई थी। मेरे लिए पर्सनली भी खुशी की बात है कि आपके साथ मेरे परिचय को और संबंधों को उसको भी 25 साल हो गए हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं मानता हूं कि ये जो 2001 में आपने जो भूमिका अदा की, एक विजनरी लीडर कैसे सोचता है, कहाँ से शुरू करता है और संबंधों को कहाँ तक पहुँचा सकता है, इसका एक उत्तम उदाहरण भारत रशिया के संबंध है। एक्सेलेंसी, यूक्रेन के संकट के बाद हमारी लगातार चर्चा होती रही है। आपने भी समय समय पर एक सच्चे मित्र के रूप में हमें सभी चीजों से अवगत कराया है। मैं समझता हूं कि विश्वास बहुत बड़ी ताकत है और आपको मैंने अनेक बार इस विषय की चर्चा भी की है और विश्व समक्ष भी मैंने रखा है। विश्व का कल्याण शांति के मार्ग पर ही है। हम सबको मिलकर के शांति के रास्ते तलाशने चाहिए और पिछले दिनों जो प्रयास चल रहे हैं, मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि विश्व फिर से एक बार शांति की दिशा में लौटेगा। एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले दिनों विश्व समुदाय के सभी नेताओं से जब भी मेरी बात हुई, और उन्होंने जब विस्तार से मेरे चर्चा की, मैंने हमेशा कहा है कि भारत न्यूट्रल नहीं है, भारत का पक्ष है और वो पक्ष शांति का है। हम शांति के हर प्रयासों का समर्थन करते हैं और हम शांति के हर प्रयासों के साथ कंधे से कंधा मिला करके खड़े हैं। पूरे विश्व ने कोविड से लेकर के अब तक कई संकटों से गुजरा है। हम आशा करते हैं कि बहुत ही जल्द विश्व को चिंताओं से मुक्ति मिलेगी और एक सही दिशा में प्रगति के राह पर विश्व समुदाय को एक नई आशा पैदा होगी। एक्सेलेंसी, मुझे पूरा भरोसा है कि आज दिन भर हम अनेक विषयों पर चर्चा करने वाले हैं। भारत और रशिया के आर्थिक संबंधों का अधिक विस्तार हो, हम नई नई ऊंचाइयों को प्राप्त करें, ऐसे बहुत ही आशावादी आउटकम के साथ हम हमारी इस मीटिंग को आगे बढ़ाएंगे, ये मेरा पूरा विश्वास है। माय फ्रेंड, मैं फिर से एक बार आपका हृदय से बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं।
Well, that was Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his opening comments at the one-on-one meeting that the two principals between India and Russia are currently doing, and then they will have expanded level talks with their delegations as well. Prime Minister looking towards a world which has less conflicts, less issues, and more, and also looking for peace. Here we are showing you more of these shots.
भारत में आपका स्वागत करने का अवसर मिला है। कल से आपके डेलीगेशन के लोग अनेक मीटिंगों में व्यस्त रहे हैं और बहुत सारे आउटकम के साथ आज हमारी ये समिट आगे बढ़ रही है। एक्सेलेंसी, आपकी यात्रा बहुत ही ऐतिहासिक है। 2001 में जब आपने कार्यभार संभाला और भारत की आपकी यात्रा पहली हुई, उसको आज 25 साल हो गए और उस पहली यात्रा में ही स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की एक मजबूत नींव रखी गई थी। मेरे लिए पर्सनली भी खुशी की बात है कि आपके साथ मेरे परिचय को और संबंधों को उसको भी 25 साल हो गए। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं मानता हूं कि ये जो 2001 में आपने जो भूमिका अदा की, एक विजनरी लीडर कैसे सोचता है, कहां से शुरू करता है और संबंधों को कहां तक पहुंचा सकता है, इसका एक उत्तम उदाहरण भारत रशिया के संबंध है। एक्सेलेंसी, यूक्रेन के संकट के बाद हमारी लगातार चर्चा होती रही है। आपने भी समय समय पर एक सच्चे मित्र के रूप में हमें सभी चीजों से अवगत कराया है। मैं समझता हूं कि ये विश्वास बहुत बड़ी ताकत है और आपको मैंने अनेक बार इस विषय की चर्चा भी की है और विश्व समक्ष भी मैंने रखा है कि विश्व का कल्याण शांति के मार्ग पर ही है। हम सबको मिलकर के शांति के रास्ते तलाशने चाहिए और पिछले दिनों जो प्रयास चल रहे हैं, मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि विश्व फिर से एक बार शांति की दिशा में लौटेगा। एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले दिनों विश्व समुदाय के सभी नेताओं से जब भी मेरी बात हुई और उन्होंने जब विस्तार से मेरे चर्चा की, मैंने हमेशा कहा है कि भारत न्यूट्रल नहीं है, भारत का पक्ष है और वो पक्ष शांति का है। हम शांति के हर प्रयासों का समर्थन करते हैं और हम शांति के हर प्रयासों के साथ कंधे से कंधा मिला करके खड़े हैं। पूरे विश्व ने कोविड से लेकर के अब तक कई संकटों से गुजरा है। हम आशा करते हैं कि बहुत ही जल्द विश्व को चिंताओं से मुक्ति मिलेगी और एक सही दिशा में प्रगति के राह पर विश्व समुदाय को एक नई आशा पैदा होगी। एक्सेलेंसी, मुझे पूरा भरोसा है कि आज दिन भर हम अनेक विषयों पर चर्चा करने वाले हैं। भारत और रशिया के आर्थिक संबंधों का अधिक विस्तार हो, हम नई नई ऊंचाइयों को प्राप्त करें, ऐसे बहुत ही आशावादी आउटकम के साथ हम हमारी इस मीटिंग को आगे बढ़ाएंगे, ये मेरा बड़ा विश्वास है। माय फ्रेंड, मैं फिर से एक बार आपका कहीं से बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूँ।
Right, so if you're just joining us, you were listening to Prime Minister Modi's opening remarks at the start of his summit with President Putin. Let me quickly recap the main takeaways from his remarks there. Prime Minister Modi began by talking about his association with President Putin that dates back to the turn of the millennium in October 2000, specifically when President Putin came to India for the first summit when both sides decided to elevate their ties to a strategic partnership. He described President Putin as a true friend of India. He went on to describe President Putin as a visionary, a leader with foresight who saw the evolution of India-Russia ties going forward as well and put them back on an even keel. And then, interestingly, Prime Minister Modi pivoted to talking about world peace. He spoke about the joint efforts being made for world peace, and he says and he hopes that the efforts will prove fruitful in the days to come. And he was equally optimistic about the outcomes of his talks to be held in New Delhi in the next several hours with President Putin. Right, so time to bring in our correspondents, our colleagues who are covering this summit for us. Siddharth Bharadwaj joins us from the Newspit, and joining me from Hyderabad House is my colleague Amrit Pal Singh. Amrit, to you first. Your thoughts, your takeaways from the Prime Minister's opening remarks. And I found it interesting that he pivoted to talking about world peace in general, and to my mind, Ukraine-Russia conflict in particular. He's saying that he hopes the joint efforts will bear fruit in the days to come. Your thoughts, Amrit, on the main highlights of the Prime Minister's opening remarks there?
Absolutely, Ramesh. He pivoted after welcoming him and saying that it is an expression of the visionary leadership of both India and Russia, that the ties have come to here in the past 25 years. But you're right, he pivoted to the peace talks, and he said that we've been exchanging notes since the conflict started, and I'm hopeful that the efforts that are being made to restore peace will bear fruit. But very interestingly, he made a remark saying that I've always said that India is not neutral in this. He said India is on the side of peace. And India has not been neutral throughout the conflict. India has always taken sides, and India has taken the side of peace. And he insisted that India will take this approach. The last time when he had met President Putin, not in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but back in Russia, the then SCO, he had told him that dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward. This time he did not use that expression, but he referred to the peace talks, which are essentially a sort of dialogue, which are trying to get the two sides to dialogue. And he said, we stand behind that, and I'm hopeful that it will lead to a lasting peace, and also with that will come the development of the world, and the world badly needs this conflict to end and peace to be restored. Ramesh? Right,
and Siddharth, the Prime Minister also spoke about the economic cooperation, and he highlighted about the new heights that this cooperation could take in the near future. What do you think? And the Prime Minister also spoke about the visionary leadership of President Putin. Put that into context for us in terms of looking at a future roadmap in terms of economic cooperation.
Well, definitely, Ramesh. I'm sorry, Mark. I told earlier as well that economic partnership between both the countries is actually this is a sector. The trade sector is a very pivotal sector. It's a very important sector. When you talk about the partnership between both the countries, and I also earlier mentioned that it currently stands somewhere around $68.7 billion US. This is a great opportunity for India to actually narrow the deficit, because currently India exports less than $5 billion. The deficit is pretty big, and this is a great opportunity for India to actually narrow that. And economic partnership between both the countries is, by this historic visit of President Putin, is set to take place. It's set to elevate between both the countries. And when you talk about what Prime Minister just said, in his opening remarks, he said that peace is the only way, and that, like my colleague Amritpal Singh has also mentioned, that India's stance is not neutral. India always goes for peace. India has always chosen peace, and dialogue and diplomacy are the only thing through which a solution could come out. No solution has ever been found on the battlefield. So he said that he's very much optimistic and hopeful that the peace in the global world would return really, really soon. When you talk about the significance of this visit, Mark, earlier I've also mentioned there is a very historic and significant visit by President Vladimir Putin. Both the leaders are there at the opening remarks. We have seen Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaking about the peace, and later in the day it will be followed by the engagements of both the leaders, and there are several MOUs which are expected to be signed, and one interesting thing would be the labor mobility pact, which is also expected here, and which will open up opportunities for the blue collar workers, and will also set up the legal framework when it comes to migration. And it will also contribute to the economy of both the nations. So in that manner, this is a very significant visit. And yes, what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said, by what he said, that we all got to know that India's stance is always choosing peace over everything, and that dialogue and diplomacy is the only way wherein peace could be restored.
Right, Siddharth and Amrit, thank you for your inputs. We'll come back to you momentarily. But in the meantime, let me go back to our guests joining us on this broadcast, Ambassador Sinha and Professor Mishra. Ambassador Sinha, to you first. What did you make of the Prime Minister's opening remarks there? Did he tick all the right boxes for you?
Absolutely. I think a very apt remarks. He injected a personal element when he first met President Putin when he'd come here, and the role that President Putin has played in developing this relationship. I think that's something that we tend to forget, because he has basically steered our relations to where they are today. If you recall, when he became president, things between India and Russia, this is after the breakup of the Soviet Union, a few years after, in the interregnum you had the leaders in Russia, the Russian Federation, some of them were not particularly inclined, were not really keen on further developing relations with India. They were looking westwards, and they thought that their panacea lay in the West. Obviously, since then they must have realized that was just a chimera. I think President Putin realizes the importance of the relationship, realized it when he assumed power. He even realized it when he was, I think, deputy mayor of St. Petersburg many decades ago. So I think all credit to him, and of course to his Indian interlocutors, the Indian leaders who interacted with him, particularly Prime Minister Modi, for really building this very important relationship. I think Professor Mishra spoke about the Act East policy and the connectivity. I'd just like to mention the the International North-South Corridor, something that I have been personally associated with. In fact, I do recall visiting Chabahar, which is a very key pin of that corridor some time ago, 2011, I think. And these salience of developing this corridor, unfortunately, not much progress has been made because of the sanctions regime. Meanwhile, and not just on Russia, but also Iran. Meanwhile, the connectivity as such, from what I understand, has already been established. So I think when this conflict with Ukraine ends, and there's some semblance of normality, I do expect rapid progress on the international North-South corridor. And that would really help connecting India to not just Russia, but to Central Asia and to Europe ultimately.
Right, indeed. Professor Mishra, let's turn back once again to Prime Minister's references to peace. And he also did talk about, economic cooperation. If I try to relate the two, I mean, in terms of peace is only achievable, really, if there is economic security to some extent, isn't it? And we have seen in the past as well, many Nobel laureates have received the Peace Prize because of their work in working towards, providing economic security at the grassroots and the lowest levels. In this context, if we look at, our two countries in terms of our relationship in the economic sphere, you were talking really earlier about, the highly skilled people. But at the point, there are semi-skilled people in large numbers who would require, greater opportunities abroad. And definitely, I mean, they have the model of the Gulf, where we can see Indians have done very well to raise the economy levels of the Gulf countries. Why can't the same be replicated in Russia?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mark. I think this idea that Prime Minister Modi and President Putin would give a collective message to the world is already started, as we witnessed in Prime Minister Modi's opening remarks. It's a message to the world. It's a collective message that, number one, Russia-Ukraine conflict is something that worries India as a trusted, reliable partner of Russia, but also India's position, that India is not ambivalent. India is not sitting on the fence. India supports proactively the idea that peace should prevail in the region and between Russia and Ukraine. And he's also mentioned that President Putin has been briefing him regularly on the developments that have taken place so far on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So very important message, and I'm sure the world is listening carefully to this. Now coming to your question, the blue-collar labor migration is important. It has played a very important role, as you rightly pointed out, in the case of India's contribution to the Gulf. And Russia needs blue-collar workers in there. And India could fill that void, as it were, in the far eastern regions of Russia, particularly. But I think more important and mutually beneficial way, I'm not sure if it can be materialized this time, but India and Russia must work together in migration, mobility of highly skilled workers. Russia is in need of developing its own IT sector, its own advanced technology sectors, and India could play that role. And it's a mutually beneficial area. There is a lot of absolute, I would say, absolute complementarity between the two countries on that front. Now, if you just take a look at the list of ministers who are accompanying President Putin, it gives us a very clear sign as to what they are planning and what kind of agreements can be expected. The rumors are, reports are that up to 20.
I could share a great deal of details about the events taking place in Ukraine. We are taking together with some partners, including the United States, on a possible peaceful settlement. Thank you for the attention aimed at finding a solution to this situation. Our relations are deeply rooted into history, but it is not the words that matter, it is the substance of the matter which is very profound. We really appreciate that, and the fact that you, ex-Prime Minister, pay special personal attention to that. Over the past years, we have done a great deal of work to develop our relationship. As our countries and our economies move at more opportunities for cooperation, we open additional areas for cooperation, including those related to high-tech, aircraft, space exploration, high-tech, and artificial intelligence. We have very close and trusting cooperation in the military and technical area, and we are planning to move forward in all of these areas. This once again underscores the level and the trust of our relationship. Our teams have done a great work before this visit. They have prepared a great number of documents for us. We have an opportunity to talk in more detail about some of them. I'm sure that we'll have a very fruitful working day.
President, we heard President Putin make his opening remarks there at the beginning of his summit with Prime Minister Modi. He spoke about bilateral ties. He also spoke about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. He spoke about the opportunities for peace. And he thanked Prime Minister Modi for paying special attention to this issue.
Indeed. And we continue to have our guests with us as well as our correspondents. If correspondents are available, let's go once again to Amritpal Singh for his reaction to what the Russian president has said, and to put that into context with what the Prime Minister said. Amrit, are you with us? Yeah. So you You heard the comments of President Putin. Just relate that in a way to what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said.
Thank Prime Minister Modi for his efforts and following this issue closely. And he said, and the Prime Minister in his remarks was very clear that India stands on the side of peace. And he hoped that the efforts being made to restore peace and end this conflict will bear fruit. So in that sense, the two sides, reiterated that the way forward is working towards peace. Of course, one can argue that Russia, the very fact that these efforts haven't really moved forward at the pace they should have is because both sides, that's Ukraine and Russia, have differing views on how to achieve or on what to agree on to end the conflict. But that said, President Putin was quite thankful of Prime Minister Modi, saying that he in a way thanked him, saying that we understand your position and you've been closely following that, and we appreciate that. And he also expressed confidence that the bilateral relationship will further deepen and the ties will be strengthened. Mark.
Amrit, you've covered several summits for us for the last many years now. And as it happens every so often, sometimes symbolism becomes as important as substance or substantive outcomes from a particular summit. In that context, I'd like you to weigh in on what we saw yesterday at the New Delhi airport upon President Putin's arrival. We saw Prime Minister Modi break protocol to receive him at the airport, number one. Number two, we saw the proverbial hug, warmth in their relationship. And last but not the least, a power ride in the Prime Minister's motorcade to Seva Tirth, the rechristened official residence of the Prime Minister, where the two leaders had a private dinner. And the Prime Minister also presented President Putin with a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. Your thoughts on the symbolism surrounding this visit of President Putin's?
I think what happened yesterday, the Prime Minister going to the airport to receive President Putin, then both of them riding to the Prime Minister's official residence in the same car. We saw a similar thing happen at Tianjin SCO a couple of months back. This signifies the importance that India attaches to Russia. Prime Minister Modi, as the Prime Minister of India, extending that gesture or putting out that gesture for President Putin shows the warmth of not just the two leaders, but also the symbolism is that India-Russia ties are pretty strong, are one of friendship. Because President Putin, in a media interview in Moscow just before he took off for Delhi, was asked about the car ride there in Tianjin. He said, I invited him over, it was impromptu, and it is it signifies our friendship. So the same way the Prime Minister, doing that gesture signifies the friendship between not just Narendra Modi and Vladimir Putin, but between India and Russia. So I think yesterday's symbolism set the stage today for today's talks, which are right now going on in Hyderabad House behind me. Where the two sides would be behind closed doors looking at issues, how to narrow differences on issues that they have, and how to build on the complementarities that exist in the relationship to take this relationship to greater heights or strengthen the relationship. So the giving of the Bhagavad Gita, I would read, signifies how in the message of Bhagavad Gita that you end the war and for the greater good. and finally the greater good will prevail. So I think that was a symbolism, but that has sort of set the stage not just for the talks that are taking place in Hyderabad House, but the events that follow, the business forum, where they look at strengthening the bilateral relationship and also exchanging views on how the two countries can contribute towards greater global good, a lasting peace in the world, restoration of global supply chains, and getting back to solving the problems that face humanity today.
Indeed, and if I may add, Amrit, there very quickly on the Bhagavad Gita dimension of the relationship. The Bhagavad Gita is essentially Lord Krishna's advice to Arjuna on the battlefield, and it helps resolve his own dilemma. So in a way, the Bhagavad Gita might contain solutions to world leaders, world crises that we are facing as we speak. And who knows, it might come handy for world leaders in different parts of the world, including Russia for that matter, Mark.
Indeed, and a Russian translation of the Bhagavad Gita been given to President Putin. But Professor Mishra, a conversation has been talking about symbolism. If we look at experience, I mean, these are two of the most experienced leaders on the world stage currently. 25 years going is what President Putin has brought to this office. And of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been in elected office for almost the same length of time. And on the world stage, we can see that, his stature continues to grow. So in this context, when they talk about issues like world peace, is there, that element of credibility that, can be added to it?
Absolutely. Both these statesmen are very experienced, and they have led their respective countries in a remarkable fashion. The kind of economic development that has taken place in both India and Russia, the diplomacy, the statecraft, military strategy, battling the battles that are necessary, all of this tells us that both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin are on the same page when it comes to their leadership capabilities. In terms of symbolism, I would also like to draw your attention to this very smart, very subtle gesture that Prime Minister Modi made. Giving Bhagavad Gita is not just about peace. It is peace as the first option. And there is a very interesting shloka in Bhagavad Gita, which says that, Hatava prapasi swarga, jito ava bhokshase mahim, tatmat uthis konteya yuddhaya kritanashya. So, if you read between the lines, it doesn't say that, India's message, Prime Minister Modi's message is very clear. You don't have to give up your rights, your territory, just to make peace. You have to do what is right, what is just, what is honorable for people of Russia. So even though India is talking about peace, it is talking about a just peace. It is talking about peace that is acceptable to Russia and on its own terms. So I think the message is very clear. If we go by the message that Lord Krishna gave to Arjuna, I think a similar message has been conveyed here by Prime Minister Modi to President Putin, that he stands shoulder to shoulder with Russia on these things, negotiating an agreement which is respectable, which is honorable for the country that is Russia and its people. So a lot of messaging here.
Indeed, talking about messaging, if I may just add to what Professor Mishra was saying there, the Bhagavad Gita is a compendium of distilled ancient Indian wisdom. And to many scholars around the world, this could be a treatise, a book, a reference point, a reference guide, as it were, for world leaders everywhere to take recourse to in the times of dilemma, when they do not know which path to take or which path not to take. So who knows, as far as messaging goes, this might help world leaders, including President Putin, in the days ahead, given the crises that he and the world generally faces. But we'll come to messaging in just a bit, but time to go back to our colleagues who are covering this summit for us. Vishal Barrister joins us. Vishal, now you've covered the defense talk between India and Russia that were held yesterday in New Delhi. Your expectations from the summit itself in terms of deliverables insofar as defense is concerned, Vishal?
Well, absolutely. A very good afternoon to you, Ramesh and Mark. Yes, this is going to be a very, very important visit. It's a 30-hour speed visit, as we may call, of President Putin. And it is focused on the strategic alliance between the two countries. And the timing is very, very important because we are celebrating 25 years of India-Russia bilateral relations. And when we talk about the defense deal, yes, the focus is very much on there because you saw how the defense minister of Russia, he came a day ahead of President Putin's visit, and the whole defense of India-Russia deal is very, very important for both India and Russia because Russia has been facing the sanctions from the Western Front, and it wants to push its own deals, and India at the same time would like to maintain its strategic autonomy, and that is why India and Russia have to tread very cautiously because India has also to look at different options. But as far as this visit is concerned, the key areas would be the delivery of S-400. We saw how S-400 was very, very helpful to India during Operation Sindoor, and we are also expecting more such units which were postponed to 2026 because of the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war. And India would like to have a timeline on the delivery, and at the same time would like to have advanced variant of S-400 and maybe S-500. And as far as the deal with China, between China and Pakistan is concerned, the J-35 stealth fighters to Pakistan by China has not gone unnoticed. So India would also be looking at options. So yes, we have an option in Russia. They are ready with their Su-57, which is the advanced version of Sukhoi. We are also looking for the advanced variants of Sukhoi 30 S-29. Squadrons of Indian Air Force are dependent on Sukhois. So these are the options that India would be looking at. Mark.
Vishal, also, you know, when we look at, you talked about S-400, there's also possibility of S-500 and Su-57. The unique relationship that we have with Russia is that they allow co-development, they allow technology transfer, which you know gives them a certain advantage in terms of our dealing with them. But the only issue is that sanctions may follow. To this extent, you know, how is the Ministry of Defense actually looking at the potential of all the tried and tested, you know, weaponry that Russia has, because they've been fighting a long war, in terms of getting the best for our country and the threat perception that we have in our neighborhood?
Well, absolutely, Mark. Very, very crucial issue raised by you. We've seen during Operation Sindoor, India was fighting a two-front war that is out in the open domain because the Pakistani army and the Air Force were having Chinese weapons. And we've seen how Russian weapons were very, very helpful to us. But at the same time, we also have to look about the pressure from America. The America has been pressurizing India, and we've seen the result of a 50% tariff. And also the European Union is applying a lot of sanctions on Russia. But Russia has always been India's dependable partner from the days of, from the era of Soviet Union. And we have seen how Sukhoi and their other aircraft carriers have been helpful for India's defense. So definitely we cannot ignore defense despite of all the pressure. But at the same time, India would like to maintain its strategic autonomy and also to further bolster its strategic alliance with Russia. So when Russia is ready with its technology transfer, that would be a welcome step for India, because India has been focusing more on making India campaign. And let me also tell you that in January 2025, when the year began, it was announced by the defense minister that this is going to be the year of reforms. So India is looking at all options, but technology transfer is one of the area which would interest India as well, because we already have their aircrafts in our Air Force, 29 squadrons are all armed with the Russian Sukhois, and their surface to air defense also, then aircraft carrier, I beg your pardon. We have 2 aircraft carriers, and we are expecting the third one very, very soon. So it is going to be the technology transfer which is going to interest India very much. Mark?
Right, Vishal, thank you for your insights. We'll come back to you momentarily if we can later on this broadcast. But going back to our guest, Professor Mishra, who is still with us, will be joined momentarily by another guest, Ambassador Meera Shankar, in just a bit. We'll try to connect with her as well. But coming to you, Professor Mishra, if we take a step back and look at Russia per se, in its regional and global influence, Russia would say that it is a power. It's here to stay. It's a force to reckon with. It is no pushover. It's a consequential power on the world stage. In your estimation, how would Russia or Moscow or the Kremlin be looking at this commentary or discourse about a new G2 comprising the US and China? And in that context, do throw some light on Russia-China ties as well.
Look, Russian position on G2 is very clear. They are against G2 and they support multipolar world order, which has equal respect for all the countries, if not equal share in terms of decision making. Russia is still a member of the United Nations Security Council, and that gives us tremendous power. In comparison with China, which is often called the second most important country in the world economically and militarily, is not true. I mean, for all practical purposes, even though China is a huge economy, number 2 in the world, when it comes to diplomacy, diplomatic influence, and military partnership, strategic partnership, Russia is far ahead of China. So that makes Russia a bit uncomfortable with this idea of G2. We also understand, and I've read a number of Chinese commentaries on G2, for them G2 is just a small short-time leverage to deal with Trump. They know that Trump is not going to respect G2. He's not going to follow through on this. And they look at G2 as one of the attempts to re-engage, reset their ties with Trump. Now, so far as Russia-China relationship is concerned, I think they have a lot of strategic understanding and trust, and they understand that they are on the same side on a number of fronts. UNSC resolutions prove it over and over again. They have mutually overlapping strategic interests and shared concerns on the US hegemony in the world. Their partners are more or less the same, except this India-China bit. I think Russia and China have a lot to share, and they have a lot in common in terms of their diplomatic influence and their relations. On the trade front, just like India, Russia is also very uncomfortable with China. So Russia-China partnership, even though it is very good at the moment, has a transactional nature. Unlike India-Russia partnership, which is not transactional, both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin talked about the emotional bond, the trust that they have. In case of Russia and China, this is more a tactical design because of their.
So they have their differences, right? They have their own differences.
They have a lot of differences, and
right.
It includes even the labor mobility. If you look at how the Chinese labor has been treated,
right.
Especially in the eastern and southern part of Russia, it is very clear that Russia is not very happy with the way the Chinese labor has been
right.
migrating to Russia and trying to settle down in that country. And they have their loyalties with China. So I think Russia's discomfort with the Chinese labor is something that gives India an added advantage. And also the fact that Russia and China, they have a short-term tactical alliance, is manifested in the fact that it was Russia which wanted India in the SCO, whereas China wanted Pakistan. In BRICS also we see this kind of dynamics where Russia keeps supporting the Indian agenda and Indian items, and China does not. Last year SCO defense minister meeting was a telling tale of how India and China are, on differing sides when it comes to terrorism. But India and Russia are on the same page. And this meeting also, after this high-level meeting, consultation and MOU on fighting terrorism together, and intelligence sharing is also likely to come up. So that tells us a lot about the trust that exists between India and Russia, and also the tactical arrangement alliance that China has with Russia. So these are two different stories, and one doesn't harm the other.
Okay, Professor Mishra, I'll come back to you on that issue and the power dynamics that are on. But currently, let's go back and listen to the two principals once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Putin held bilateral talks at the Hyderabad House in New Delhi. The two leaders held detailed discussions aimed at further strengthening the bilateral relationship between the two countries. The Prime Minister said that India and Russia share a long-lasting and time-tested bond.